Here's a quick video for those of you that prefer to see it in action. So, using a page from the same book, I'm just going to use a little bit of sandpaper, and I'm going to work on these two. Oh, my nails look great. I'm going to work on those two bills right there, and I'm going to sand this one and leave this one untouched. So, using just a small little piece of sandpaper, and just very lightly. It doesn't take much. You can see right here on this one that the ink is spreading. It really depends how hard you push. I actually pushed too hard on that one. It doesn't make that much of a difference, especially if you're coloring over it, and you can brush off most of the ink dust. You do see a little bit of striae in the pages, but depending on what you're going for and the motion you used, I went side to side. If you don't want to see that, you can go back over the same area and go up and down. Little circles, and you'll end up with a much more diffused look to the final tooth to the page. Obviously there is somewhere, again, if you're coloring over something, it won't show that much, and if you actually want to soften the lines of whatever you're coloring to make them less harsh and less coloring book or cartoony looking, then actually it can be a good technique to fade out the lines somewhat. I'm going to be using polychromos like on the other page. This time it's the juniper green color, and I'm not doing anything fancy here. I'm just going to color in lightly both sides and then a little bit darker on the border and money symbol, just so you can see the difference in what adding the tooth makes. I know right now this one looks really bad. On the other page I didn't go so hard. I had sanded the other one about a month ago, and I put too much pressure this time, but I'd rather show you what it looks like if you put too much pressure rather than restart this and then pretend that I did it perfect the first time, because you won't always do it perfect. But honestly, it really doesn't matter, especially if you're not leaving the area white or uncolored. And if you really wanted to, you could use a really sharp colored pencil. You could use a micron or other fine liner and go back over something like the dollar symbol, so that it won't even show and be an issue. So I'm just going to lightly color. So the polychromos are great. I really, really love them. They have great color payoff. They have great pigmentation. But because they are oil-based and not wax-based, it's a slightly different feel compared to using something like, well, the Prismacolors or even Crayola. Any color pencils that you're used to, it's kind of like a drier feel going down. Sorry. It doesn't require more pressure, and in fact you can actually put less pressure and get color payoff, which helps you really build up layers. But if you're used to coloring lightly and having a ton of color, not all the colors will pay off that way. And it's a slightly different feel. It was the same thing I found the first time I ever colored with the Marco Raffine, which is the same thing. Those are an inexpensive brand of oil-based colored pencils from China. I noticed the same difference in feel. So what you can see here is I've colored both sides with the same light pressure, and it almost looks like I've used a different color. The coloring is very scribbly, but this side looks lighter and this side has more color payoff to it because the tooth of the page is picking up more pigment from the pencil. I don't have to push as hard as I would to get more color off because the paper it's more grippy for the pigment in the color. I'm going to go back over it again. I haven't used this pencil yet. It's actually still the point on it from when I got it. So it's not the best point for coloring with at the moment. It doesn't have a nice angle in it that I like to use, but it's wearing down as I go, so it's not so bad. See, now that I've built up more color, and I'm still pushing really, really lightly, but now that I've built up more color on this side, you can see it's closer in tone to the color on this side in one layer and in two layers and in one. If I do the same thing on this side, you can feel the difference too so much. It really feels more like you're working on a watercolor paper. or something a little bit more professional, you can feel the color, you can feel the way the pencil drags on the paper versus gliding across it. It just gives it more, it feels better. I'm not saying this is a technique that you would use all the time. There's definitely situations where you wouldn't want to do this, where you'd want to have the much lighter color application, or where it might just screw up something that you're working on or you don't want to take the chance. But for a technique to play around with, or a way to rough up your paper in a very inexpensive way, it really, it's fun, and it really gives a nice quality to the paper after. So as you can see here, the same 2 layers of light color. This one is much paler, this one has more color payoff. Both of them you still see the paper through. They're not burnished, they're not, oh, you know what? I am going to, I didn't plan this, so forgive me. This takes a moment, but I will burnish them and see what happens if I can, without knocking this down, find my, there we go. I have a few different burnishing tools and a few different finishing solvents and tools, but in this case I'm going to use my Prismacolor colorless blender and just go over each one. This one I have used quite a bit, that's why the color is shorter. I'm going to first burnish this one. I'm just doing light circles. I'm not going back and forth. The whole point right now, I'm not trying to blend the color. I'm not trying to smooth it around so much as I'm just trying to press down any tooth left in the paper and have the color fill in the gaps. I realized as I'm doing this that I said I was going to color the border and centers in darker, and I haven't done that, but this is just an example. You can see even as I go the difference that burnishing makes. The color becomes richer, it fills in more of the paper, you don't have so much of the white peeking through. And it just makes the color look more flat and even and complete. If you had layers of color, of different colors, this would help even them out and blend them together. I'm really not pressing hard. I'm not forcing into the paper. I actually did not put, I usually always put, especially when working with colored pencils, I usually always put a layer, at least 1 layer of cardstock in between so that I don't imprint down into subsequent pages, because then when you color those, they'll have, you know, like in detective novels where they can scribble over the paper and see the raised imprint of like the phone number the guy was calling or something. You know, I don't want to have an imprint of whatever I was coloring here on the subsequent pages, but I'm pressing so lightly for this example, I didn't even bother, and I can tell just by feel that there's no transfer of anything that I was coloring under there. So you don't have to press hard, not even to burnish. It's more a matter of what you're doing than how deeply you're doing it. So this side has been burnished. This is the side that was not sanded. This is the side that was sanded. I'm going to burnish it now. As you can tell, I clearly did not plan on making a video today, because not only did I not figure out in advance what I was going to say, but I probably would have done my notes if I had planned this out. But I wanted to get this post in today and get the blog back up, and I figured there are some people, myself included, who really like to see something, not just the pictures. They want to see the process. And I figured, why not? I had the time, it was quiet, the kids are at their dad's, and the only thing making noise to interrupt me is the wind rattling my windows. So it is taking me much less time to burnish this side. The tooth wants to lay down so nicely. The color is mixing along beautifully, and I mean, you can see just how much more rich this side is. Now I did rush the sanding, which is why you can see, especially here, I did push too hard across the center, so you can see that. When I went around after and did a bit more in circles, that's how the rest of it got so blended. And even from burnishing, some of that loose pigment filled in on the dollar sign, which I admit was kind of looking pretty raw before. And now it doesn't look so bad. So I know it's not a technique for every single time, but I really, really like how the color lays down when there's more tooth to the paper. And I think that for playing around in coloring books, instead of photocopying them onto fancier paper instead of worrying about maybe tracing if there's some page that you love and you want to color and maybe frame it, instead of worrying about tracing or photocopying it onto a better quality paper and then worrying about maybe the ink will smear. Instead of worrying about anything, take the pages you have, take the coloring books you have, no matter how inexpensive they are, a little bit of cheap sandpaper. I mean, this is gonna last like crazy amount of time, and play with it and experiment, because it's a lot of fun. It really gives a different look. You don't really feel anything on the page that will affect it, and it'll give you an opportunity to see something new with your colored pencils. So I hope you enjoyed that, and that's it.